You know, there are sure a lot of jokes about water and wine. There's one about a priest who is driving erratically. He gets pulled over by a policeman. The cop asks him if he's been drinking. He says, no, just water. The cop sees a bottle of wine in the passenger seat. He says, well, what's this? And the priest pretends to look startled and says, oh, Jesus has done it again. And there's a visual joke, a picture of supermarket shelves filled with bottles of wine, and a sign above them that says, water. The caption is, ooh, Jesus was here. And then finally, there's the mocking lines from Herod's song in Jesus Christ Superstar. So you are the Christ, you're the great Jesus Christ. Prove to me that you're divine. Change my water into wine. So many jokes. And they're kind of funny, but they reflect a shallow understanding of what's really going on in the story about the wedding in Cana. And leave it to John, whose gospel is always full of symbols and signs and metaphors, and it's not always what it seems. These jokes imply that Jesus was doing a kind of a stunt to show his power, like maybe something a newly minted Hogwarts graduate might do at a gathering of muggles who always thought he was just a weird, nerdy kid, and he'll show them. No, there's more than that here. And we hear this next to the Isaiah passage, which talks about the reign of God as if it's going to be a marriage between the God and the people, ushered in by a bridegroom. And in that marriage would be a new kind of relationship of great joy and reconciliation, an era of abundance and prosperity for Zion. And so it's this idea of a marriage that in this case is sort of a metaphor, meaning a comparison, but not the thing, that all the people will be married to God. And then here we have this wedding, where again, this idea of marriage is at the center. And really at the root of these two, the metaphor and the actual wedding, is the nature of God as all about hospitality, all about welcoming. And there's a Greek word, if you know about the city Philadelphia, Philadelphia, phila means love, and Delphia means brothers, Delphos. So it's the city of brotherly love. Well, the word for hospitality, really coming from the Greek, is philoxenia, which literally means loving strangers. And if you've ever heard the word xenophobic, you know about the root xeno, stranger. That would be the opposite of philoxenia, is xenophobia. So this kind of philoxenia, love of the stranger, was an obligation for people back in Jesus' time. It meant first that when they saw someone coming to their home for help, they were first to welcome them. Whether they were known to them or they were coming as a sojourner. Then they were to offer them food, water, and shelter. They were to wash their feet because they would have been walking out of doors and on dirt roads and amongst animal droppings and such, so their feet would have been filthy. And they were to offer them protection, including from attack or assault. There were thieves on the road, and so home was supposed to be a sanctuary for a guest. And this is no matter who the guest is, no matter what ethnicity they come from, what gender they come from, they are to be welcomed. And of course, they're also going to need relief from the elements, which were harsh in those days, desert and lack of water. And this is certainly part of the tradition of ancient Israel, but also in Jesus' time. He tells a story, there's a story in Luke about Jesus' visit to Simon the Pharisee, and Simon fails to offer him this simple welcome. In this same story, there's a woman in the village who was seen as less than, a sinner, by the people of the village. And she washes Jesus' feet with her tears. And yet Simon calls her out Like, how can you do that to Jesus? You're not worthy. But Jesus rebukes him. He calls him out. He says, do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. So not being hospitable, not being welcoming, not being a good host was a sin. To this day, when Jews travel around the world, they can call a local synagogue and someone will draw from a list of names of families who have offered to host travelers in their home. And this is particularly important for Jews who follow the very strict dietary laws and might otherwise not have a good meal to eat. So this hospitality continues to be a tradition and is part of our tradition as well, which I think our more secular understanding of hotels and homes are for families and hotels are for strangers and travelers has sort of broken that down a bit. And the obligation of hospitality is actually two-way. It goes both ways because people in this time and today, we all are expected to be good guests. The traveler is expected to accept what the host offers. Not to say, really, you're serving me this. Or that is dishonoring the host. To take someone's food and then betray or insult them in some way was considered a very despicable act. And a guest is also not to ask for more than was offered, to not create extra work for the host holder, and to show gratitude. So now we have weddings, which were really hospitality kind of on steroids. They were great, extravagant showcases for the hospitality that was expected in that time. And now by the time of this wedding feast, the bride and groom would have spent about 7 days together all by themselves on their kind of honeymoon staycation. And then they would come out of their retreat and participate with the family of the bridegroom in this celebration, because the bride would become a member of the bridegroom's household. And there would be lots of feasting and dancing and merrymaking and lots of wine. So let's talk about wine, because it's so the center of our story. And of course, we can't forget that wine has particular importance to us too, as it figures in our Eucharist. Wine was the principal drink at daily meals in those days. It was not necessarily something that was just for special occasions or just for grown-ups. And sometimes it was watered down a bit, partly to decrease its alcohol content, or to purify the water, or to expand the quantity of the liquid. And there was both new wine from the harvest and old wine from the harvest, and the old wine was what was considered the better wine. It was sweeter and stronger. Now the responsibility for this wedding feast, including the wine, fell on the bridegroom's family. So running out of wine would have cast shame upon them and caused potentially consternation for the bride's family. Who is this guy that we married into that he doesn't know how to take care of his guests? So a host who has run out of wine is a big problem. And we can understand one way of Jesus' action in the wedding in Cana as filling his obligation as an invited guest. And his mother as well is there, and she is showing concern for the host as well. She's concerned that they're running out of wine. She's clearly helping. And we can understand potentially that there may have been many uninvited guests at this wedding that might have swelled the numbers, or for some reason made them run out of wine. Because again, an uninvited guest, a traveler coming to the town who learns there's a wedding going on, has hit the jackpot. That person will go to the wedding and know he will be fed and greeted and maybe a little bit of festivities too. So first, Jesus is modeling hospitality, the love of neighbor, which he preached, and upholding the Jewish tradition. But his act isn't exactly running to Safeway and picking up a few bottles of wine. I mean, the jugs of water that he turned to wine are enormous, the kind you stand on the floor, and there are 6 of them, and they're all turned into wine. So let's say 25 gallons per jug, times 6 jugs, that is 150 gallons of wine. And it is all the good wine. So it seems that wedding is going to go on for days, and that bridegroom will become an absolute legend in the village. Now, these sort of stupendous numbers are clearly meant to place Jesus' act as one of higher power. It is beyond human scale. It is beyond what even the best host could do with his human resources. It is an act of extravagant generosity, of grace beyond all measure, of abundance beyond imagining. And this is in this way that the giving of the wine has two meanings to us. It is both what Jesus wants to do for the host, to take care of the host's problem, and to bring joy into the situation that is about to, turn into the Diet Coke wedding. And, but also this is what God is showing us is God's intention. So it's a symbol of more of this kind of thing, God's extravagant love and abundance and prosperity and enoughness and joy. Because here, it's interesting in this story that Jesus is the one who changed the water to the water to wine, but only the servants who know that, who fill the jugs, and the disciples can know that that happened. Because the steward just is given the wine and tastes it and says, this is delicious. And he goes to the bridegroom and says, you have been an excellent host, because most people hold back on the good wine and until everybody's drunk. And then they start to serve. They serve them good wine until they're drunk, and then they serve them cheap wine. But you're serving good wine right from the beginning. So the bridegroom gets the credit. The bridegroom is the one who is seen as the wonderful host. Jesus does not take the credit. But because the servants and the disciples have seen this, they do know that this is a symbol of Jesus acting in divine capacity as the Messiah. And so we can understand that they do go out and spread the word. And it is in this way that this sign, like the other signs in John's Gospel, play out and the word about Jesus gets spread. But this is the first of those signs that reveal his arrival of the reign of God in Jesus. And each of these signs, this wedding, and whether it's this or a healing of the blind man or a lame man, or the feeding of the 5,000 on the hillside, or raising Lazarus from the dead, are happening at a human scale. This is not like the God who parts the Red Sea, or turns people into pillars of salt, or rains frogs or locusts on the land. This is a God who has come to us in human form to be with us in intimate acts, but yet with extravagant grace and love and healing and resurrection, but brought close to us. Acts that we can relate to, but also require a higher power than our own. So this is one who, as a human, knows us in our humanity, knows our shame, our deep hunger, our pain, and forgives us, quenches our thirst, heals us, brings us new life, fills us with joy, and is not seeking the credit, but is only seeking to be invited into our hearts and invited to the wedding, if you will. This is grace upon grace beyond anything we can attain through our own power. Indeed, beyond anything we can ask or imagine. So Jesus said, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Like those at the wedding, we need to first believe and then to invite Christ into our midst, and we will know this abundance. The bridegroom is here. Welcome to the feast.